Have you ever felt something in your heart, but you could not explain it? Maybe you were sitting alone, maybe it was very quiet, and suddenly you felt as if someone understood you, even before you spoke. Some people say this is just a feeling, but many wise people, the mystics, the seekers, say something very different. They say sometimes when the world becomes silent, the heart begins to hear, not with the ears, but from deep inside. So, this brings us to a very mysterious question. Can a human being actually speak with Allah? And if Allah speaks, how does that happen? It is a voice, a feeling, a light in the heart. Today we are going to slowly explore this beautiful and mysterious idea together. We will look at the stories of the prophets, the wisdom of the mystics, and the hidden language of the heart. So take a deep breath, let the world become a little quiet, and let us begin this journey.
Have you ever been sitting in like just absolute total silence?
Oh, yeah. Those really heavy, quiet moments.
Right. Maybe it's, I don't know, late at night or in those really early hours of the morning before the world wakes up and you're completely alone and
Mhm.
suddenly you feel this presence.
A sense of profound clarity almost.
Exactly. Something that isn't spoken out loud. It doesn't, vibrate your eardrums, but your heart instantly recognizes it as an absolute truth.
It's a very specific, profound sensation. And, well, it's one that usually leaves a person completely stopped in their tracks, just wondering what on earth just happened.
Right, you just
Yeah.
sit there thinking, wait, where did that come from?
Exactly.
Because, well, today's deep dive is venturing into some truly fascinating, completely uncharted territory for a lot of us.
It really is. It's a huge topic.
Yeah. We are exploring a philosophical and historical framework that is just steeped in spiritual mysticism. I mean, our mission today is to uncover the secrets of the heart, decode this actual language of silence, and tackle the ultimate question. Can a human being actually communicate directly with the divine?
And, right out of the gate, we really need to clarify what we mean when we talk about this kind of communication. Because the mystical traditions we're looking at today make a very sharp distinction.
Right, so we aren't talking about standard religious practices here.
No, not at all. This isn't a deep dive into traditional religious dogma. We aren't talking about the mechanics of everyday formal prayer or like reciting specific verses.
Okay, so what is the focus then?
This is an intellectual, deeply spiritual journey into the mechanics of how the divine supposedly communicates. And the overarching philosophy here is that it doesn't happen through spoken
It's
words.
wholly silent.
Exactly. It happens through this descending awareness, and it only happens in absolute silence.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of the language of silence,
Yeah.
because it completely flips our everyday understanding of communication right on its head. I mean, when you think about modern prayer or how most of us approach the concept of the divine, it's incredibly transactional.
Transactional is the perfect word for it.
It's like leaving a voicemail.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what it is, a voicemail full of requests.
Right. It's like, here's my list of demands. Here are the things I'm stressed about at work. Please fix this health issue. Please grant me that promotion.
You just drop the message and expect results.
Yeah, we leave the voicemail and then we sit around waiting for a callback
Yeah.
in the exact format we requested. We basically expect the divine to respond to our script.
Which is such a human way to look at it. But these mystics argued that true dialogue, like actual communication, requires the human being to stop talking altogether.
Just completely shut up.
Literally, yes, it's a radical shift in perspective. The core premise of this tradition is that the primary language of the universe and of the divine is silence.
So how do they actually contextualize that? Because it sounds so abstract.
Well, to contextualize this, these mystics often point to the historical and spiritual account of the prophet Moses. When you look at that story, the profound divine dialogue didn't happen in a grand, echoing palace.
Right, it wasn't a big public event.
Exactly. It didn't take place in a bustling temple or a mosque filled with thousands of worshipers. It happened near a burning bush in a desolate, totally silent valley.
A completely isolated moment. But I mean, why a desolate valley? Is the implication that you literally have to go to the desert to hear this?
Well, not necessarily a physical desert, though isolation certainly helps, but the valley represents a psychological state.
Oh, okay, I see.
Because think about it. In a bustling city, or just in our modern lives, we are constantly surrounded by an echo chamber. We hear the opinions of others, the demands of society, the noise of our own ambitions.
It's just constant noise.
Right. A desolate valley strips all of that away.
Hmm.
It is an environment where you are acutely aware of your own vulnerability. The silence they are talking about isn't just the absence of noise. It is an active, profound quiet where the only frequency available is a higher one.
So what does this actually mean for you, the person listening to this right now? Because most of us aren't standing in desolate valleys next to burning bushes. We're like commuting or doing dishes or sitting in a cubicle.
Well, the deeper psychological meaning here is that this level of communication is often born not in moments of formal ritualistic worship where you are just sort of going through the motions.
Checking off the spiritual boxes.
Exactly. It is born in moments of profound, ego-shattering helplessness. These mystics believed it can happen within a single silent tear.
Wow. A single tear.
Yeah, it's an internal valley of silence. When you exhaust your own ability to fix a problem and you finally just, surrender, that internal quiet is the valley.
That makes perfect sense conceptually.
Yeah.
It's when you finally stop trying to control the narrative. But I have to push back here because this brings up a massive epistemological question.
Okay, let's hear.
If this communication isn't made of audible words, right? If it's not a booming voice from the clouds, how exactly does the human mind perceive it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. And more importantly, how do these mystics know they aren't just making it up in their own heads? Like, how do you distinguish a profound divine truth from, say, a random subconscious thought popping up because you're stressed or because you ate something weird for dinner?
That is probably the most critical question you can ask. Because if you're going to claim direct communication with the divine, you really need a rigorous way to test it.
Exactly. You need proof.
And these traditions didn't shy away from that skepticism. They actually developed a very strict framework to distinguish true insight from mere imagination or, ego-driven hallucination.
So how do they test it? Because to the person having it, a hallucination feels very real.
Oh, absolutely. But the primary test was the resulting transformation. A hallucination or a random intrusive thought might shock you for a moment, but it doesn't fundamentally rewire your character.
It just fades away after a while.
Right. It fades. True mystical communication, according to this framework, permanently alters the person's nature. It brings an absolute, unshakable internal certainty that basically aligns with a sudden increase in humility and wisdom.
So you become a fundamentally different, better person.
Exactly. And to map out the mechanics of this, these traditions categorize the communication into 3 distinct signals, or veils. But before defining them, they anchored this concept in the ultimate archetype of spiritual connection.
Which is?
The ascension or the mirage.
Ah, the story of the prophet's night journey.
Exactly. The historical framework describes the mirage as a journey to a realm of proximity so intense that even the highest angels couldn't enter.
They had to stay behind.
Right. And the key detail here is that in that ultimate space, the communication didn't happen through a Q&A session. It happened purely through an exchange of presence, love, and gaze.
Just a silent exchange.
Yes. It establishes that the highest form of divine communication transcends language entirely. It is a direct transmission of state.
Okay, so that's the foundation.
Exactly. From there, the mystics broke down the human experience of this into 3 specific terms. The first one is Ilham.
Which translates roughly to inspiration, right?
It does, but we really have to separate it from our modern diluted definition of feeling inspired to paint a picture or write a pop song.
Right. It's not a sudden urge to start a podcast.
Definitely not. The mystics described Ilham as a sudden, undeniable kiss of light dropping directly into the heart.
A kiss of light. Man, I love that phrasing. But how does that actually function in the brain?
Well, think of it as bypassing the entire frontal lobe. It completely bypasses human reason, logical deduction, or, argumentation.
So you aren't thinking your way into it.
Not at all. You didn't reason your way into this knowledge. You didn't weigh the pros and cons on a whiteboard. Yet when it arrives with an absolute certainty.
It just hits you.
Yeah. It feels like a truth you have somehow always known, but which was just suddenly illuminated. It's an intuition so heavy that your entire body recognizes it before your brain even processes it.
Okay, so Ilham is this sudden download of truth. You didn't study for it, it just arrived. What's the second signal?
The second is called Kashf, which translates to unveiling.
Unveiling. Okay, let me see if I can find an analogy for this. Because Ilham sounds like getting a message, but Kaf sounds more visual.
Visual is a good way to think about it.
So is it like, okay, imagine you've lived your entire life in a pitch black room.
Yeah.
You know there's furniture in there because you bump into it, right? You stub
Yeah.
your toe, but you don't really know what the room looks like.
Right, you're just navigating blindly.
Exactly. And then for one split second, a bolt of lightning flashes outside the window.
Oh, that is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Right. Because in that fraction of a second, the darkness is unveiled. You see the exact layout of the room. The lightning fades, the room goes dark again, but your fundamental understanding of reality has permanently changed. You now know where the table is.
That's exactly it. The physical veil of everyday reality is suddenly lifted, and the true nature of things is revealed directly to your inner eye.
It's not something you can unsee.
No, it's permanent. It's not knowledge acquired from a teacher. It's a moment of profound clarity regarding the unseen forces of the world.
And then finally, the third state is the heaviest. It is called Waridat, which means descent.
Descend. What exactly is descending, and what does it actually feel like? What descends is a sudden, overwhelming spiritual state or a divine presence. If we look at this through a modern psychological lens, it's akin to the deepest possible flow state, but magnified, like exponentially.
So you're just totally in the zone.
Beyond the zone, the mystics described Waridat as an experience that pulls a person entirely out of their timeline. You lose the sensation of past and future. You lose your physical awareness. And crucially, you lose your ego.
So it's a complete silencing of that default mode network in the brain. You know, the part of us that constantly chatters about who we are, what we need to do tomorrow, what people think of us.
Precisely. In that moment of Waridat, the world fades away, the self fades away, and there is only a luminous, overwhelming awareness of, I am here. The environment itself becomes the communication.
Okay, so we have Ilham, the inspiration that bypasses logic. We have Kashf, the lightning flash of unveiling, and Waridat, this heavy descent that pulls you completely out of time.
Those are the three.
It's overwhelmingly clear that receiving these signals requires a highly attuned receiver. Like, you can't just be scrolling on your phone on a distracted Tuesday and expect to catch this frequency.
No, the static is way too loud for that.
Right. So what is the actual psychological and spiritual state of the person who is capable of hearing this silence?
Well, that brings us to the core philosophy of these mystics, which is the concept of fauna, and the heart as the only true vessel for this connection.
Fauna, ego death. This is a concept that gets thrown around a lot in modern wellness circles, but it sounds like these traditions took it to a completely different level.
A much deeper, much more demanding level, yes.
So think about your own ego right now for you listening to this. Think of your I as a room inside a house. For almost all of us, this internal room is desperately crowded. It is noisy. It's packed to the ceiling with our anxieties about work, our desires, our need for validation from our peers.
And it's also packed with our spiritual pride.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the desire to be seen by others as a good, moral, enlightened person. The spiritual ego can actually be the most crowded, stubborn furniture of all.
Right. So if you invite a guest over, in this case the divine, but your room is completely hoarded with all your own stuff, there is simply no physical space left for the divine to enter. The door is basically blocked from the inside by your own identity.
That is a perfect translation of fauna, which literally means annihilation. The philosophy is completely uncompromising on this point. As long as the I remains, as long as that room is full of your own ego, the dialogue is impossible.
It just can't happen.
No. These texts insist that the divine looks at the heart, not the tongue. It doesn't matter how beautiful or eloquent your spoken prayers are if your internal room is just full of yourself.
But wait, I have to ask. If the goal is to completely annihilate the I, to empty the room completely, then who is left to have the conversation?
It's a great question.
Because doesn't communication inherently require two parties, like a sender and a receiver?
That is the ultimate paradox of mysticism, and it's where they introduce the concept of the mirror.
The mirror.
Yes. When a mystic's ego dies, when they achieve fauna, they don't cease to exist physically. Instead, their heart becomes a perfectly clear, polished mirror. They stop projecting their own desires and their own image outward. They simply reflect. The philosophy explains that it is in this completely clear mirror of an emptied heart that the divine sees his own reflection and converses with it. The receiver is the reflection.
So you aren't talking to the divine. The divine is recognizing itself within your emptiness.
Yeah.
That is incredibly deep.
It really is. And the historical framework grounds this abstract idea in reality by pointing to specific figures.
Like who?
Men like Shah Shams Tabriz, who is known for wandering in states of profound, intense absorption, or Saki Sarwar and the penetrating presence of Bu Ali Qalandar.
So these were real historical people who embodied this.
Absolutely. And these weren't men known for endless, noisy sermons. They didn't write massive encyclopedias. They lived in a state of such internal emptiness that their very presence, their silent gaze, fundamentally altered the people around them. They spoke a silent language.
Their existence literally became the message.
Yes. There is a famous tradition, a hadith, that's often quoted in these circles. Beware the intuition of the believer, for he sees with the light of God.
He sees with the light of God.
Exactly. The implication is that the mystic, having emptied themselves, literally views the world through a divine lens. Their intuition isn't just a smart guess, it's a reflection of that descending light.
Okay, the theory is breathtaking. The idea of emptying the room, becoming a clear mirror, seeing with a higher light. But how does a normal person actually do this?
It sounds impossible, right?
Yeah. I mean, these historical texts don't just leave us with this impossible poetic ideal, do they? They have to provide a roadmap. They must tell us how one actually goes about polishing this mirror.
They absolutely do. The traditions lay out 4 rigorous, spiritually demanding gateways. Think of them as psychological and spiritual exercises required to achieve this state of dialogue.
And before we walk through these 4 gateways, I want to highlight a really striking contrast the philosophy makes, because there is this universal spiritual promise, remember me and I will remember you.
Right, the core tenet.
But in our modern, hyper-connected minds, we hear that and we immediately expect a transaction. I remember you ping me back like a social media notification. The universe liked your prayer.
Yeah, we want a little red dot on our spiritual dashboard to prove we did a good job.
Exactly. But the mystics make it so clear that is not how the response comes. It doesn't pop up to validate your ego. It drops into the depths of a quiet moment. It arrives in the silence.
That's beautifully put.
So what are these 4 gateways that actually lead to that quiet moment?
Well, the first gateway, which we've been touching on, is fana, total annihilation. But practically speaking, this isn't just about defeating basic physical temptations. It's much more subtle than that.
How so?
It's the death of your secret intentions. It is the absolute death of showmanship and religious pride. You have to actively destroy the part of your psychology that wants a reward or wants to be recognized for being on a spiritual path.
Which might be the hardest thing of all for human beings.
Oh, without a doubt.
To do good, to be devout, without wanting anyone, not even yourself, to pat you on the back for it.
It requires relentless self-awareness. Once you step through that, the second gateway is immersion in remembrance.
Okay, remembrance. What does that entail?
Now, on the surface, this sounds like chanting or reciting mantras. But the psychological exercise here is moving far beyond just reciting words. The philosophy states that the remembrance must become your actual heartbeat.
Like it's automatic.
Exactly. It's building a spiritual muscle memory so deep that it's no longer something you do with your tongue. It's something you are. The rhythm of your subconscious existence becomes the remembrance.
It's the difference between memorizing the lyrics to a song and actually feeling the music in your veins, you know, where you don't even have to think about the next note. It just flows through you.
That's a perfect analogy. You embody the music. The third gateway is purity of heart, and the metaphor they use here is rust.
Rust.
Yeah, think about it. A rusted piece of metal cannot reflect light, so a rusted heart simply cannot tune into that divine frequency. It's physically and spiritually incapable.
So what constitutes rust in this context?
Yeah.
Because I imagine it's not just, skipping a prayer.
No, it's deeper. Malice, envy, arrogance, cynicism, holding on to grudges.
The heavy emotional baggage.
Exactly. The mystics taught that every time you engage in envy or arrogance, a spot of rust forms on the mirror of the heart. If the heart is corrupted by these things, the mirror is covered in thick dirt, no light can reflect off of it.
So what's the fix?
You have to engage in the daily, exhausting psychological work of scrubbing that rust away, forgiving people, letting go of your anger.
So you have to constantly scrub the mirror. It's not just a one-time event where you're suddenly clean forever.
Every single day. It's a continuous practice. And then finally, we reach the fourth gateway, which the framework positions as the ultimate, most powerful step.
Okay, I'm ready.
The ultimate surrender.
Let's unpack this one deeply. Because surrender is another word we completely overuse in our culture.
Right.
What does ultimate surrender actually look like in practice here?
It describes a terrifying and beautiful moment. Imagine a person has done everything. They've pursued knowledge, they've sacrificed, they've fed the poor, they've scrubbed the rust off their heart for decades.
They've done all the homework.
They have done the work. After all of that immense effort, the individual must sincerely look inward, drop their entire spiritual resume, and say, "Oh Lord, I am nothing."
Wow. After doing all the work, you claim absolutely none of the credit.
Exactly. You don't bring your list of good deeds to the dialogue. You don't say, "Hey, look how polished my mirror is. Don't I deserve a profound experience?"
Right. You don't cash in your chips.
You bring your absolute emptiness. And the profound philosophical point here is this: it is exactly in that microsecond of admitting total nothingness, of true surrender, the divine finally says, "Now I will speak."
Man, this reframes our entire modern understanding of what it means to be on a spiritual path, or even just a path of self-improvement.
It turns it upside down.
It really does. Because we are so intensely conditioned by our culture to think of growth as an acquisition. We want to acquire more knowledge, acquire better habits, read more books, add more skills. We treat our internal lives like we're building a corporate resume.
We want to be full.
Right. But this philosophy says the exact opposite. True elevation isn't about acquiring, it's about emptying. It's about meticulously taking things out of the crowded room until only the space remains.
Because only in the empty space can the light of Ilham, Kashf, and Waridat actually descend. If you are full of yourself, you are completely deaf to the silence.
This is a tremendous amount to digest. I mean, it challenges everything about how we operate. As we bring this deep dive to a close, I really want to bring this directly back to you, the listener. Because these ancient mystical frameworks aren't just, history lessons. They're invitations to look at your own psychology.
That's the real value of these texts.
Exactly. So I want you to look back in your own life for a second. Have you ever felt that first knock of connection?
That is the question that bridges the ancient with the modern.
Think about it. Was there a moment in a silent room? Perhaps during a period of intense grief or intense struggle. Or maybe just a random quiet Tuesday where a tear slipped out when you were entirely alone and you felt an unexplainable presence.
A moment of complete vulnerability.
Right. A moment where you weren't asking for anything, you weren't checking your phone, you were just overwhelmed by the present moment, and somehow, in that total emptiness, you felt deeply understood.
If you have, this tradition would suggest that was a glimpse of the true dialogue. And what's crucial to summarize here is that this kind of communication isn't a magical event reserved for prophets of the past.
It's not locked away in history.
No, it's a state of being that is accessible. The framework teaches that once this state is experienced, once that light kisses the heart, it stays alive inside you. It changes your baseline reality forever.
That's incredible.
But the rules of engagement haven't changed in thousands of years. The price of admission is your ego. The uniform you must wear is silence. And the only door you can walk through is an emptied heart.
The price is your ego, the uniform is silence, and the door is the heart. That is incredibly profound. But as we leave you today, I want to give you one final lingering thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've explored today, but brings it crashing right into our present hyper-connected reality.
I think you all need to hear this.
If absolute silence, the dropping of our ego, and the scrubbing away of our desire for validation are the literal required prerequisites to hear the highest truths of the universe, what does our modern world's obsession with constant digital noise, notifications, and self-promotion say about us?
It's a sobering question.
Are we accidentally engineering a society where the deepest, most profound voice in the universe is structurally impossible to hear? Take a moment of silence today, just a few minutes, with no screens and no demands, and see what you find.
So maybe talking to Allah is not about using many words. Maybe it begins with the heart becomes quiet and truly listens. When the noise of the world becomes less, the light inside the heart can become clearer. And sometimes, in that silence, a person feels guided, comforted, and understood. If you have ever felt a peaceful moment like this, a moment where your heart felt close to Allah, then you already know how special it is. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Stay curious, stay sincere, and keep your heart open. Because sometimes the deepest answers come in the quietest moments.